Welcome to COIQ, a first-of-its-kind video program about health innovators, early adopters, and influencers, and their stories about riding the roller coaster of healthcare innovation. I'm your host, Dr. Roxy, founder of Legacy DNA Marketing Group, and it's time to raise our COIQ. On today's show, we're going to talk with one of healthcare's pioneers, early adopters, and top influencers in the field of connected health, and frankly, somebody that I admire most in this industry. Dr. Joseph Kvedar, the Vice President of Connected Health at Partners Healthcare, is going to share with us why some healthcare innovations fail to commercialize and why some succeed. He's also going to share with us some of the biggest challenges health innovators will face in 2019 and how to overcome them. Welcome to the show.
I'm delighted to be with you, Roxy. Thanks for inviting me.
You bet. So I think that you've been leading the way in this field for decades. So most of the people that are listening to the show are probably already know who you are. But just in case we have a few people that don't, maybe we can just start off the conversation by you sharing a little bit about your background and what you do.
I'm delighted to do that. I don't think I'm so very popular that I don't introduce myself for sure. So I am a dermatologist by training, faculty or professor actually at Harvard Medical School. And really that's my roots as a clinician. But about 25 years ago, I got intrigued, frankly obsessed with a concept that why is it that we demand that healthcare happens when two people are together in the same room? And that's the only way you can get healthcare. And actually today, as we speak, the adoption of any other type, which we'll get into terminology, I'm sure, is still only about 12% among doctors, 12 to 15%. So 25 years later, we've made a dent, but we've got a long ways to go. And so I still keep hammering away at that concept. And so that took me to this land that we now call digital health. In the beginning, we called it telemedicine. And we just kept ginning up programs to illustrate that concept. Some of it was interest of our parent institution. I am a clinician at the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. So they wanted to do a lot of work overseas with second opinions. So we put that program together. We also got interested in chronic illness management because it's a big problem. And I should mention also, because we're talking about successive innovation, that one of the things I did early on was to launch beyond dermatology. And as much as I'm passionate and love my clinical work, it is a very small part of healthcare. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like if I was going to make a difference in this new care model, that I really had to get beyond dermatology, which is why chronic illness management, online second opinions, all of these other things that we do. And so that was the start. And then we went through some lean years for sure. I was mentioning to someone yesterday that in about 2005, we thought the telemedicine was no more. So we abandoned that name and we invented the name Connected Health. And we really did it because nobody wanted to talk about telemedicine.
Wow.
So we thought, we're going to create a new word so people will actually ask us what it means and we can talk to them. And that was what we did. We said Connected Health sounds novel. Let's talk about that. And sure enough, oh, what's that? How does that work? And it worked. So it became a term of art in the industry, and I think still is to a great extent, although very recently probably surmounted by the term digital health, which is certainly all-encompassing. So that leads us to the present, where I have a system level oversight at our delivery system for telehealth programs. I still have a strong foothold in our innovation group, which was recently rebranded as Pivot Lab. So they're helping, it's through a lot of corporate partnerships, create the future of digital health. And I have the privilege of doing things external to partners, which I love, such as, and maybe we'll come back to this, but co-chairing the AMA's Committee on Digital Payment Reform, working with the AAMC, advising a number of companies. So it's a really fun job, and you can tell I'm delighted to talk about it.
And let's just talk a little bit about the conference, because that's how we met.
And there's that, right? So 15, 16 years ago now, I've kind of lost track. My colleague, Joe Trinello, had this idea of bringing people together, convening. And it grew over the years. In 2016, we combined it with the Personal Connected Health Alliance at HIMSS and their Connected Health Conference. So it's now a HIMSS event. It occurs every October. I am privileged to be program chair, so it's my job to line up the content, which I do with a very, very capable group of people at my side. And I think, again, we're talking about innovation and the role of convening. It's amazing to me. I was recently because another interest of mine is technology and aging. And I was recently at a meeting that the Dean of Harvard Medical School convened a number of people in the area. And just the rich tapestry that we build on when we meet new people with similar interests is very special. So these events that we all go to now and when we started the conference, there were about probably 4 or 5. There's now 4 or 5 a week, and everyone has to sort of split their time and choose wisely. But the value is so much in the networking and the sharing of ideas, and I think that's an innovation feeder as well.
I like to say that you were doing it before it was cool.
Well, people in the beginning, and again, this is we're talking about success and innovation, but people thought I had lost my mind.
Right.
Truly, they did, because I was in the lab right around here in the Harvard teaching hospitals. That's the path. You open a lab, you do basic research, you get promoted to professor, you become a chair and a dean, and that's the thing. And that wasn't for me. So they really thought I had kind of abandoned ship. To do this stuff. And in the early days, it was a little bit of rough sailing, but we got by that.
Yeah, and look at you now. So, a big part of the reason why I even started this show is this stat that I've been so passionate about and spent like the last 6 years kind of, I would say, being married to, is that over 95% of healthcare innovations brought to market fail to generate a profit or reach any acceptable level of customer acceptance. Yeah. And so I would love to get your feedback, and I know the listeners would as well. Why do you think that some healthcare innovations fail and some succeed?
Well, of course, there are multiple reasons. I could tell the story of a company that we launched out of our center in 2010 called Healthrageous, and it was an early play on remote monitoring for chronic illness, but in the corporate benefit space. Mm-hmm. And the reason I tell that story isn't to tell the details of that company, but to illustrate one point, which is we were doing really well. We had 4 major health plans piloting the solution, and they were giving really good feedback. And then all those Affordable Care Act exchanges happened. Mm-hmm. And every single one of those within a week said, we're not going to continue working with you because we have to focus on the exchanges. So those are the kind of, when you're small and you have entry level interest in what you're doing, you're so vulnerable to the way the wind blows or anything else, right? The executive that's your champion leaves the company and nobody else seems to want to pick up the contract. And so that randomness is inherent in bringing innovations to market. And sometimes there are quite legitimate reasons that companies fail, like from a product perspective, there's not a product market fit.
Yep.
And there's a founder often, and this isn't meant to be a slander, but it is, I think, accurate. Often someone from technology or engineering who is passionate about a technology and feels like that's going to do the thing. And one rule I would say that we must all follow is that technology should never lead. It should always follow a business problem. So that's one thing that you see a lot of. I think we were talking about this the other day, how it's become fashionable to raise a lot of venture money.
Mm-hmm.
And people seem to measure their entrepreneurial success by the amount of venture money they can raise. I suspect part of the reason for that is right now there's a lot of venture money out there. And so people can raise tens of millions of venture fund. But what you do with it, of course, is critical. And if you don't have the mindset to use capital efficiently and thoughtfully, you can see companies go south very quickly that way as well. And then I think, again, there are probably I'm forgetting or not mentioning 10 times as many as I'm mentioning here. But the other one that I see a lot of is unfortunately people problems.
Mm-hmm.
You spoke about being married to a concept. When you form a company, you're married to your fellow executives.
Mm-hmm.
And if it, and because it's brutal, the pace is breathtaking.
Sure.
Building any business, I'm sure you feel that way building your business. But if you don't get along with those people, or if there's early, like you didn't have the conversation about equity that you should have with your co-founder, that can ruin a company 5 or 6 or 10 months into it, when there's a real feeling, a negative feeling or misunderstanding, because those are the times when you can't stop and repair it, because you fly out tomorrow to see a customer that you didn't know you were going to fly out to see, because they're either going to sign a contract or they're having a problem. It just gets to be breathtaking. So I think settling the people issues early on, understanding and really, really being humble about product market fit, raising only the right amount of money, not the most you can raise, and then spending it thoughtfully. The other thing, which is related to that I definitely see, is people who don't bring on. Now, not every startup needs a CFO right away, but you need a controller. You need someone who can keep the books, because sloppy use of finances is a big potential problem. So those are a few thoughts. Probably, as I said, there's 10 times more that I didn't mention.
No, I think that's great insight. Just kind of going back to one of the things that you said, I see it all the time with innovators. The innovation becomes their baby, and they love their baby, so everyone else is going to love their baby. And, most people won't tell you the truth. They'll just say, I love your baby too. Nobody wants to tell you that you have an ugly baby.
Or unless you're the person they're asking you to pay money for it.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Absolutely.
One of my other favorite, I subscribe to a newsletter from an investment banker, and part of the reason is that it's an area of business that I don't fully understand, so I'm eager to learn. But this guy is a very simple, and that's one of the reasons I read his stuff, is because it's like plain English. And he always says, what are you doing that people care enough about? What is the problem you're solving that people care enough about to pay you to solve? And will they pay you enough that you can make a profit?
Absolutely.
It's two simple questions. And yet, especially in this economy where people are building businesses based on aggregating and then monetizing later and all that kind of stuff, it can be very kind of opaque fairly quickly.
Yeah, that's so true. A lot of times there might be a real problem that the innovation can solve, but if it's the last on the priority list, then it's really pointless. And so I see a lot of health innovators spending a lot of time arm twisting, trying to convince the target audience that they have a problem that they need to solve.
Yeah, another fun thing I see with startups, and maybe, again, if this is the direction you want to take it, otherwise you can shut me up and move on. But when you ask them about competition, and they'll say, well, no one's really doing what we're doing.
Right.
And I say, but That's not what I asked, because people are solving the problem that you're trying to solve somehow. And in my own case, having been an advocate and evangelist for a new care model for 25 years now, every single day I wind up in front of someone who's quite happy with the old care model. Thank you very much. And even though I can logically tell them about what I want to do and why it makes sense, they don't need to change. They're solving that problem another way, and it suits them just fine. So I think that's a big dose of reality that entrepreneurs need to take as well. Is the competition may not be someone who's got your tech innovation, but maybe someone's doing it with pen and paper and they're doing just fine. They don't need your system.
Absolutely. Just a substitute of status quo, right? Yeah. So, what I also see very often is even if someone has a product, an innovation that is technically or functionally superior to what's available in the marketplace, which is basically what you just brought up, it doesn't necessarily guarantee success. This whole commercialization process is very complex, especially in healthcare.
Right.
What do you think makes it even more complex to commercialize an innovation in healthcare, maybe compared to other industries?
Well, I reluctantly answer that question because I wish it wasn't so. It is so. I quite agree with you, but I feel bad about that. And again, I think it discourages some very entrepreneurial people from getting near healthcare because they feel like sales cycles are long, and they are. I mean, selling anything to my health system is a frankly, year process in most cases, and you have to get so many different people, whether it's the finance people, the clinical people, et cetera, the regulatory people. Maybe you got to throw in IT, privacy, and security. The list seems to go on and on. And so I think that there is that duality about what we do, that there's always a clinical voice. Mm-hmm. One of the things, I don't care, and we don't always agree with our friends in the payer industry or in the pharmaceutical industry, but we all are obligated not to hurt you. Mm-hmm. Right? You, the patient, we are obligated to do the thing that doesn't hurt you. So we are inherently more or less risk averse, or more risk. Sorry, we're inherently more risk averse, and I think that runs through and through. That's why long sales cycles. That's why multiple eyeballs look at things. That's why you have to convince the clinical committee, not just the CFO, and on and on and on. So I think that's the main reason. It's just it's fragmented sales, and the other thing is that unlike many other, and I'm speaking mostly about the provider side now, although I think certainly translates to payer. I'm not as sure about pharma, but no, the way we used to the way we would phrase it, and I would say joke, but it's not a joke, is that if there's a table full of people making a decision, one person can say no, and the answer is no, even if the rest of the table says yes. So it's that kind of sort of consensus-driven decision-making process that makes it, I think, a challenge for people to make sales. And as I alluded to earlier, they're all trying to displace something we do. Now, one of the things that I think, so that nobody starts crying and turning you off and doesn't want to hear it. One of the things I can say that I think is positive, and I have an example of it, is the bright people will look at it and the first best business case is how to make someone money. So you bring in something that helps make them money. The second best, and it can be second best by a long shot, it's not like right up there because it's a harder thing to sell, is how to make them more efficient, right? How to save them money. And most digital health innovations fall in that second category. And it's just hard because you're promising the sales target, pay me $1 now and I'll save you 10 next week. And the person writing the checks feels like they're going to lose their $1 and they may or may not see that 10. and it's buried in the back. It's a little bit like the reason that companies like Philips, GE, et cetera, are successful, because if we buy at the Massachusetts General Hospital another magnetic resonance imaging setup, there's a lot of people out there that need MRIs. We know we're going to generate revenue on that. It's a very straightforward investment. But if someone comes in and says, I have a software tweak that allows the medical technician to be more efficient, that's a much more thoughtful, nuanced conversation. Maybe we don't want to lay off medical technicians. Maybe there's a union problem. There's all kinds of reasons that might not be a good sale. Whereas, oh, make me money, sure, sign me up.
Right.
One of the companies that's a spin out of our delivery system that I think has done a brilliant job in this, and I'll use that example, is a company called Medumo. And so what they kind of started out with was reminding people to come in for appointments. That seems like a noble cause, right? A lot of people forget appointments and so forth. But it didn't really catch on until they figured out the better use case, which is reminding people to come in for their screening colonoscopy.
Okay.
And if you think about it, a screening colonoscopy takes a lot of time. You got to prep for it. It's a big deal. And on the provider side, one of the worst days in a gastroenterologist's life is when people don't show up for the procedure because they booked the time, they booked all the staff, boom, and there's no way to utilize it. It's very disruptive. So the guys at Medumo found this interesting niche where you as an individual don't want to go through all that prepping for nothing. We, as people providing the service, don't want you to be a no-show. And they capitalize on both sides of that, and they're doing quite well. Now, their business model is we pay them, but again, it's easy for us to justify paying them because every time someone shows up for a colonoscopy, all those resources are used wisely. So that's, I think, a good example of someone finding a sweet spot with a technology that in the beginning, because they, of course, a lot of them do, and it's fun for me, but they came to me when it was just reminders, and it was kind of a ho-hum, shrug your shoulders project, but they eventually found this sweet spot. So good.
So how was that discovered? Was that discovered through dialogue with prospective customers? Is it something that they just stumbled upon? How did they move from more of, hey, we're going to go to market with this, right, and then kind of that slight nuance, what actually becomes a game changer? Yeah. Well, I think they did have some unfair advantage in that the founders were a physician residents training in our system. So they had multiple different views of ways that a hospital might or might not benefit from this tool. And I honestly think there was some randomness to it because they had a lot of different conversations with their fellow trainees and so forth. And it fell into someone's head one day that, oh, wow. And again, it doesn't have to be colonoscopy, but it's something that if you miss that appointment, it's a big hit to me. Right. So in my world as a dermatologist, it could be Mohs surgery where you're coming in for skin cancer. We've got all these resources lined up and then you don't show. That's probably one of their next use cases is they'll roll something out for that. So they're going around the healthcare delivery apparatus, picking out those times when if you don't show for an appointment, it's a real pain for the provider. And then therefore for us to pay, I don't know what it is per message, it's not a lot. All of a sudden it makes sense. So if you had a health innovation company, innovator approaching you, what would you say are the top 3 or 5 things that you're looking for that they need to be mindful of as they're trying to get into a delivery network or a health hospital system? So I'm going to try to answer that in a relatively generic way. I want to separate out my passion for connected health because
I'm usually looking for, like Maduma was, as I said, that the initial conversation they had with me, I was lukewarm at best, because text messaging is kind of a yesterday's technology. And again, they turned it into a successful thing. So good for them. But it should, as I said, it should be something that is going to either enhance our practice delivery, or if it's on the efficiency side, and I happen to love efficiency, but again, it's hard. It's a harder sell. On the efficiency side, to me, it's got to enable and empower patients to do more of their own decision making and inspire them to take better care of themselves, because we need that desperately. And so that's a little personal, but I do look for that. Like, there's so many people out there that say, we're going to, and this is going to sound awful because it's countercultural right now, but we're going to offer you, Roxy, to show your medical record on your iPhone. I mean, for you, because you're educated and engaged, that might be a good thing. But for a lot of people, like, why do I care?
Right.
You know, what I can't read the darn thing. It's written in a different language. I don't even know what any of the numbers mean. So I just talked to a guy yesterday who's done what he calls a health infographic view of the EHR. And I haven't really studied it in great detail, but to me, that's kind of interesting, right? If I could make what came out of the Apple app that was your health record something that you could look through and digest the high points and it would make sense to you, I think that's a breakthrough. So for me, that part is really important. And then, as I said, the numbers have to work. That's number 3. It can't be one of my favorite examples. As I said, I like innovations that touch on aging. And one of my favorites was a Japanese robotic pet called Paro. It looks like a seal. You may have seen one. They cost $6,000. No one's buying them. Yeah. You can't sell them. Hasbro came along and created something called a Joy for All companion pet at $100. It's not as sophisticated as Paro, but they're selling like hotcakes because the price is right. So that equation about price is really important. And then, you know, the sort of corollary to that one is that people come in because they think, well, our price is high, but we're going to deliver a lot on ROI. And like I said, that's asking me to make an enormous leap of faith, which I may or may not believe in. So it's hard when your stuff's expensive and out of the gate. And some technologies really are, and that's a harder hill to climb. And then finally, this is kind of going to be consistent with what I said earlier. Present as a group of people with integrity. Present as a group of people who are professional. Have the sophistication to understand that, for instance, if you're going to deploy an IT system, we have to have some integration. We have to pass a security audit. We can't just throw stuff on our network. It's a little bit, and again, this is, how do I phrase this without sounding like an old timer, but be respectful and thoughtful. There's a lot of young, most of the time they're young entrepreneurs who are just a little bit flip about stuff like that. And that's kind of a turnoff. Sure.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about the pilot phase of the innovation process. You touched on this just a little bit. It can be a real challenge for health innovators. Obviously everyone needs the clinical evidence to be able to validate the safety and efficacy of their innovation. But a lot of companies get stuck in what I call pilot purgatory.
Pilot, yeah.
I say it's death by pilot. These health innovators that go out of business because it's one pilot after another. Describe your experience with that phenomenon, and then maybe some recommendations of how innovators can avoid pilot purgatory.
Well, you haven't given me anything easy yet, so that's a good way to spend an hour to think some of these things through with you. That's a really tough one. I think one first bit of advice is don't over customize the solution for each new customer.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you come in and say, well, we do blue papers, we fold them over a red paper, and that's our product. And we say, well, we kind of want green. And you've never done green, and you've got 3 other customers that are interested in blue and red. Just say no. Just say, no, we don't do green. If we ever do green, we'll come back. But have the guts to not over customize. And especially when you're in that early phase where getting early customers is so critical, it's a real risk.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't be stubborn enough that you have this vision, and you alluded to this earlier, that no one will buy. Well, no, I didn't mean that. But if you have 5 pilots going and they're all pretty different, that's a problem.
Absolutely. I think that is something that we just can't stress enough, because it's so easy to get caught up in the hospital system that has all the brand reputation. And so I feel compelled to just acquiesce to everything that they want, because that's going to be my path to success. And it can be so much to where you don't have anything viable at the end.
I think the other big piece of advice is to have, I guess, take a lesson from the Japanese. The Japanese negotiate for years before they do anything, and they do that for a number of reasons. But before you sign that precious pilot agreement, ask a lot of questions about. One of my favorite things to do with people just in general is to say, okay, let's pretend that X, what we're talking about, is wildly successful.
Mm-hmm.
Then what? And sometimes you're the person across the table actually doesn't have budget, doesn't have spending authority, can't really hire you, even if the pilot's successful. So you got to do a little bit of sniffing. Does that person, the one who's going to implement this system, as I alluded to earlier, do they need a committee of 5 to say yes? Do they need to run it by the CFO? Do they need to run it by the board? What is the path? And you do that through this sort of Socratic approach where you say, well, I know my pilot's going to be successful, and you kind of joke, ha. But just let's pretend it is for a minute. Then what? And I think the more granular you get about that, and what does success mean, by the way? If so, well, it worked, but it didn't save us any money, or it worked, but 10 people complained. If one patient complained, we can't do it. I mean, I wish you had told me that, right? Because, that would have wasted my time. I mean, there's this whole other side of it, which is about, and this is a hard one for startups, whether you give the technology away, whether you, in of course, our group, we have a clinical validation group in Pivot Labs, and companies pay us to validate their technology. So it's a reverse pilot in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I would say we're in the minority in that regard. But again, have that conversation about, and I guess the other, at least in academic centers, major pothole you can run into is that you're across the table from someone whose goal, and pretty much only goal, is to publish a paper.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, and they're important because you then get to take the paper around and say, we validated our technology at Hopkins or Mayo or Cleveland or wherever you like.
Yep.
But again, those people their career path is about the paper. It's not about putting you into the system and scaling that pilot. So that's when you sort of say, okay, well, if we're successful, who might theoretically pay for this? And how big could it get? And would that be your department chair? Would it be someone in another sector? Would it be hospital leadership? Depends on the app or the technology. But I think that's really critical. And not that you can avoid pilot purgatory that way, but I think if you follow those 2 rules, you can lessen the chances of it.
I think that's great wisdom. Thank you so much. I know our audience will appreciate hearing that. So the last question I have for you before we open it up to live Q&A is, there is this explosion of innovation happening, right? So, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, if you had a new innovation, it might be more easy to get in front of people. But one of the things that I hear over and over people are asking me is, how do I rise above the noise? The target audience that I am going after, 1,500, 10,000 other innovators are trying to get in front of them as well. How do I rise above the noise? Any advice that you have for folks regarding that?
Well, candidly, it's really more your expertise than mine. But so this is half baked compared to what you could offer. I mean, I have made a career, frankly, out of learning from other industries and bringing those learnings into healthcare. Part of the reason that I started in this space to begin with, because other people were rendering services without having to be in a room together. What an idea. So I think there's a healthcare equivalent to celebrity endorsements. There's a healthcare equivalent to getting buzz on social media right there. The same tools that you would use if you had a new perfume or if you got Kendall Jenner to wear your jewelry or whatever. It's not exactly that, but those are not off the table.
Yeah.
You get Andreessen Horowitz to invest in you. I mean, I know that's, oh, sure, thank you. But my point is,
sure,
there's a lot of money out there, and choose your VCs wisely. And if they have that kind of star power, use it. And so I think, one of another company that I admire, and I'm actually in a discussion with a founder about doing more with them, is Lark. And they're a chatbot company that has done a lot of work in chronic illness management. But one thing I admire about Julie is the way that she has done exactly what you described. So she's on Instagram. You scroll through your Instagram feed, you see ads for Lark. She's on Twitter. She's got, her slide deck has 10 different awards that she won for being the best of something. Now, she's darn good, but I'm sure there was some engineering behind at least some of those awards.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you get someone, again, like yourself, who knows how to create a bit of buzz. And I would not, we were talking about earlier about spending money wisely. I would not underestimate spending money on PR and marketing. It's really important. I'll tell you the reason. It is because if you really have an innovation, if it's really truly different, people will be, as I said earlier, people will be solving that problem a normal way, and they won't even think to invite you to the party unless they know about you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that has a lot to do.
I think that is great. And you have marketing insights maybe that you're not even aware of.
Well, I've hung around folks like you for a while. I have good folks that surround me that I learn from. I'm a lifelong learner in any case.
So thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us today. How do people get in touch with you or stay connected with you if they want to follow you?
Well, you can certainly, I'm actually pretty good about responding to people. I'm on LinkedIn, Joseph Kvedar, I think, at @jkvedar on Twitter, Instagram, though most of my posts are about wine and not healthcare. My email, jkvedar@partners.org. You can find my blog, which is the C Health blog. And we do a podcast as well called Well Connected. All of that stuff is on the website, connectedhealth.partners.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
What's the difference between launching and commercializing a healthcare innovation? Many people will launch a new product. Few will commercialize it. To learn the difference between launch and commercialization and to watch past episodes of the show, head to our video show page at drroxy.com. Thanks so much for watching and listening to the show. You can subscribe to the latest episodes on your favorite podcast app, like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or subscribe to the video episodes on our YouTube channel. No matter the platform, just search COIQ with Dr. Roxy. Until next time, let's raise our COIQ.